I'd like to call this special meeting to order and ask the treasurer to call the roll.
President Baker?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, but I'd rather be outside. Can we move this?
Vice President Cole?
That's a good idea.
Here.
Ms. Gibbs? Ms. Hudson? Mr. Peretti?
Here.
Ms. Reyes? And you have a quorum, Mr.
We have a
President.
quorum. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask our budget director if he's in the room to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, so the Board of Education has set aside time for this special meeting to hear an overview by staff of the aspirational programs and services being proposed for the next 5 years. The presentations today will be focused on the narrative summaries for each department of the district. Today's conversation should focus on the programs proposed by staff to take CCS to next, as the superintendent is known for saying. Programs and initiatives that will make us the highest performing urban school district in the country. Today's not the time to delve into the specific operating unit OPU details, so we won't get into the weeds, but we will hear at a high level from the superintendent and staff about those aspirational sorts of programs we're contemplating for the next 5 years. So I don't know if we had anyone sign up for public comment. No? All right. Well, then having said that, I'd like to turn the floor over to the superintendent.
Good afternoon, President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board. Over the past 2 years, our district has achieved great gains in student performance and progress. We've ushered in new innovations in teaching and engagement, and we've optimized our resources and operation to deliver services more efficiently and effectively. At the same time, as you know, we've aggressively implemented new systems and policies that ensure the fidelity and accuracy of our student-related data, mitigated the mistakes of the past, and raised the level of accountability and trust at every position throughout the entire district. More than rhetoric, we have measurable results. The commitment and dedication of our teachers, staff, administrators, and district leaders, combined with the ever-increasing engagement of our students, families, and community partners, has produced real outcomes. This fiscal year, 2017 proposed general fund departmental budget builds upon this progress and serves as the next step in our district's rise. Encouraged by leadership to envision the full needs of our students and our operations, our expert teams who are in the room have prepared a budget that is transparent, aspirational, and honest in its request. With these resources, we believe we can develop and support the talent of our teachers and staff so that they can provide students with the latest innovations in learning and maximize the impact of our limited resources. We will ensure that our aging infrastructure and the ever-changing technological needs do not stunt our students' learning growth or strain our daily resources. We are able to responsibly fulfill our obligations while at the same time address new challenges. We will deliver upon the promise of providing opportunities for a high-quality education from cradle to career to all in our community who seek to learn and build better futures for themselves and their families. Among the specific investments included, but not limited to, in this budget are the development of a 21st century digital capacity for teaching and learning, strategic, deep professional development for all employees, textbook procurement per a refresh replacement cycle, vehicle purchase and repairs per a refresh replacement cycle, deferred maintenance to maintain the district's facilities and contracted services. The leadership of Columbus City Schools is committed to creating unprecedented levels of openness, having established a thoughtful system of transparency and collaboration in this budget development. For your consideration, I now turn it over to our Executive Director of Budgeting, Scott Gooding.
Thank you, Dr. Good. President Baker, members of the board, we're going to go through in our process each of the departments that are listed here in the document on the screen in front of you. We'll have an opportunity to come up and talk about the things going on in the various departments, obviously, and I'll list these for you. In the superintendent's office, Dr. Good, David Baker will be talking about the academic services programs and services, accountability with Dr. Klein, business operations with Marisa Oldham, Treasurer CFO Stan Bajork, Internal Auditor Carolyn Smith, and then J.C. Benton working on the Board of Education Board Services programs. A little bit about our process, how we got here. This has been a journey. This is the second budget that we're doing in our new budgeting method that we started last year. A little bit of where we were last year was that we went through an annual budget process for the current year appropriations that focused on itemizing goods and services that were aligned to district goals in a prioritized manner. We did that for 1 year only. This took this to a whole new level. So the second phase, what we have here is not just an annual budget, but we're looking for a number, an appropriation resolution that we'll bring to the board for FY17. But in this document, you will also see 4 more years of projections. So we've gone from a 1 year budget model to a 5-year budget model. And typically in schools in the state of Ohio, especially when looking at the 5-year forecast, you take what the current program is and you extrapolate that for the 4 years without any major changes from 1 year to the next. So now what we can do is talk about a program and services for Columbus City Schools for the next 5 years, and we can tell you specifically what we're doing in each of those 5 years, as opposed to saying, we're going to do this and then we're going to add an inflationary factor to it for 5 years and we're going to do the same thing. Well, we're not going to do the same thing. There's things each and every year that are different from what we're doing now. So this document takes that into account. It was not an easy process. Obviously on the budget side, it's very easy to build this, but the folks sitting behind me that worked on these should be commended for the work they did. This is unlike anything I have seen in our state that takes budgeting, school budgeting, to a whole new level. I'm just kind of the architect of this, but all the hard work that came into this was the folks that actually put the plans down on paper. So we can tell you, and we'll go through this from a high level right now, and then the team is working through the Finance and Appropriations Committee as we kind of get into the greater details of what those 80 different departmental budget requests are. So we have those details there that we'll present to FAC, which will eventually come to the board in part of an annual appropriations resolution. But we're going to keep it kind of at the high level so that the board can hear the programs and services that we're looking at, kind of what the 5-year vision is. The documents and what they'll go through is just so you can hear what this will look like. Each of the departments will get up and talk about what their 5-year vision is. They will also present what their FY 2017 request will be. We look at what their key investments are. We look at major budget drivers by the categories that Dr. Good mentioned earlier, and then at the end of that, we wrap up with an outcome. So we want the board to know that we're not just asking for a dollar amount, but that we can ask that question, and what's the result? What's that outcome? How are we going to measure that? By investing $353 million in general fund non-personnel costs, what's the return on investment that we can expect? How are we going to move the bar for our children? So that's kind of where we're going. We hope that answers the questions that the board and the community are looking for. So with that, I'll kind of turn it back over to Dr. Good as we begin going through those. But I just wanted you to understand the process, and that we're in year 2 of that new budget process. There's a lot of work done by the folks behind me on that.
So with the board chair's permission, we'll begin with business and operations this afternoon, addressing deferred investments for a number of years that have compromised the useful life of our facilities.
Questions from board members before we begin? Mr. Peretti?
I apologize. I just had a question about the overview real quick, and it was just a real general question about, on this programmatic 5-year look, how is that going to impact the May 5-year forecast? Will that be the way that we look at our 5-year forecast in this area now? Looking at our, does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
As Scott mentioned, the whole purpose of this was to have the 5-year forecast and our financial planning being driven by the educational planning. And so for the first time, they've prepared not only just a 1-year budget, but a 5-year budget. So this will directly and ultimately roll right up into the 5-year forecast. So what you see in May will be the product of what we do here today. This is we're in the middle of this process, budgeting process. As you heard, this is a visionary, a request budget. So there'll be some work to do perhaps. But yes, this will roll right up into the 5-year forecast.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And you may recall that in that October presentation of the 5-year forecast, slides 16, 17, 18 indicated what was not included in the 5-year forecast. So what we present today is the beginning of what needs to be included in that forecast. So we'll invite our Chief Operating Officer, Maurice Oldham, to begin.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board, Treasurer Behort, Intern Otter Smith, Ms. Johnson, Dr. Good. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk about business operations FY17 Ask. What I'd like to start off is talk about our vision. It's very simple. In business operations, the department is committed to ensuring that our students' futures are transformed into a 21st century learning environment. And that's what we're all about. That's what our goal is, to try to make sure that everything we do in business operations is working towards that particular vision. For the FY17 requested budget, we're asking for $98,755,156.
We're on page 108 of the document for the board's reference. I know it's difficult to see the numbers on your screen, so.
And it'll be helpful to have the reference
We'll do
page
that.
numbers when
Certainly.
there's a page to reference to.
All right. Apologize for that, page 108. Our key investments in business operations fall into three different categories. Purchase services, equipment, two really, purchase services, 2 equipment categories, and then 2 purchase services. I want to talk a little bit about each one of those categories, because I think it's very critical and important that we talk about that. Under purchase services, there's $32,165,778. That particular category is a category for life cycle replacement of our roofs, asphalt, HVAC system, plumbing, gymnasium bleachers, public address systems, theater lighting, building renovation repairs, and preventive maintenance. These items all tie back into an envelope of our building. It's very critical to moving us to that next of our 21st century learning. What we find and what we did in business operation, we went through and did an assessment of our facilities based on priority. We're not saying that all of our buildings do not need to be touched. What we're stating is based on the priorities and doing it in a 5-year vision, in a 5-year plan. In year 1 of FY17, this is the number we're looking at to move in the right direction. Also, just so you know, to keep in line, this is also is to maintain and to replace, such as roofs, to maintain and replace, such as asphalts in those priority areas as well. That's along with also when we look at equipment. There's $10,883,000 for equipment replacement of bus, trucks, and support vehicles. We have a actually 12-year plan where we're looking to try to replace our vehicles throughout the district. What you'll find, as you know, we talked about previously, our buses go through rigorous inspection throughout with the highway patrol system. And that's actually changed. It used to be twice a year, now it's moved to once a year. It's critical that we put a replacement plan in place to make sure that we're addressing our buses. If you look at our fleet right now, we have 845 buses within our fleet. Of those, just to give you a quick number, we have over 40 of the fleet buses that's over 20 years old. And that's very significant now. We have a great maintenance department and vehicle maintenance department who's been maintaining those buses. But again, it's important as we move forward that we start putting and working our plan that we have. Each year we've pushed that plan off. We're looking this year to look towards moving about 71 buses per year in order to make sure we stay within plan with that particular bus. The next section you see here before you is equipment. Again, is our technology. $5,567,950 is our technology number. And again, that's what we're looking to move forward to next. We're looking at in this technology plan of outfitting our district. As you know, we started last year with your generous offer of the Chromebooks. We want to continue to move forward, but also not just particularly Chromebooks. We don't want to corner ourselves into just one item because, you know, technology continues to change. And so we want to constantly look at moving in the direction of moving to next, of staying abreast of what type of technology is out there, but also making sure our youngsters are moving towards that 21st century learning. So in that particular section, technology is our Chromebook. If you look at those first three items, I'd like to point out, those first three items, you see the asterisks to the right of them, all possibly could fall under capital dollars. That's a little bit over $39 million of capital funds if you look there. Also, the next section you see is our utilities, $17,525,281. That's purchase service, which covers our utilities, fuel for the buses, as well as our support vehicles. And in our district, we have over 100 support vehicles alone. And again, that's critical with those particular vehicles that we also create, as we talked earlier and before, about a maintenance plan and a refresh plan. As we all know, it takes, as the fleet get older, maintenance cost goes up. And again, we want to look at ways how can we reduce those costs and be more effective and more efficient, as well as be safe as well. Major budget requests that you see next, 21st century digital capacity for teaching and learning. That's $10 million, $10,246,199. Again, the difference in the previous one, the key investment, this includes not only technology equipment, internet access, purchase services for information technology. In this particular section as well, major investments, even looking at the possibility of exploring the possibility, what would it look like if we were to put Wi-Fi on all of our buses, extending the learning environment from the classroom all the way to home. And again, we believe if we have that opportunity, it has also the opportunity from a safety standpoint, making youngsters be more engaged in the bus, and hopefully with that would reduce, as I use the word anxiety, but I guess the excitement of movement on the bus while youngsters are engaged in the learning environment. Next section is strategic professional development of all of our employees. That's within business and operations. That's $312,725. I want to just sit there for a minute. I think this is critical. Professional development, I mean, we talk professional development a lot, but we miss it a lot of times on the business and operations side. This is critical. As we look at our footprint changing, looking at our buildings, we have legacy buildings, we have our new buildings, the facility master plan buildings. And what you find in that, as the technology changes, it's critical that we also keep our staff engaged and educated for that process. As you know, back in October, we hired a new directors of buildings and ground, and one of the things we're doing is looking at change management. And we're looking at how do we move our district and our department to more of a preventive maintenance opposed to reactive maintenance. In order to do that, it's critical that we train our staff on the new and upcoming systems that's out there, so that in turn that we can also maintain our equipment opposed to run to fail. We can take care of it and maintain it on a schedule, and by doing that, it can reduce costs for when it breaks down. You have to spend time, and it also impact the learning environment. And so by that preventive maintenance, from just that simple thing, it's also a direct impact on the 21st century learning environment. So that's critical to us as well in professional development. And then we look at that throughout the department. I just want to give you that one example, how critical that professional development is for us in business and operation. The next section that you see is textbook procurement for replacement textbooks. This is also critical. This is, you will see textbooks in other areas. This is really, just so you get a context, it's inside our warehouse department at Hudson Street. And this is a replacement of textbooks or replenishment of textbooks that's been lost or damaged, and just replenish those textbooks so that they're available for our youngsters on the shelf. Yes.
So we've had a lot of questions about moving our textbook technology, right? So instead of the old book cover, going into actually having maybe perhaps our Chromebooks having textbook function. Is that something we're looking at as we continue to hear in the community that some of our textbooks need to be updated?
I'll take a question if I may. So we do indeed. In fact, when we get to the academic services portion of the presentations, you'll see where there's a blending now of the acquisition products. So there's both the hard copy, the print text, and there's also the electronic or digital versions. This budget item is strictly associated with replacement of print copy text, so it wouldn't be replacement of the digital versions. So they exist in two different places in the budget, which is kind of goofy.
And I was wondering whether I should hold my question, but I guess my So Dr. Good, are we eventually going to go digital and get rid of the old? I don't want to say old because I prefer the
Right.
the textbooks, but I know some of our students do not.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. Right now, the industry's mixed on that. There's no one that's moved over to strictly digital format. It's a blending of formats still. Believe it or not, there are some students that continue to still learn better when they have the print copy text in their hands. So, but it could be that the industry will move that direction. What you will see with our textbook acquisition that's proposed is the updates to any print text are done in a digital format. So it's a cost savings for the district or a cost avoidance in the future.
Thank you.
The next section you see before you is the vehicle purchase repairs per refresh and replacement cycle we talked about previously. And this is just replacement and as well as repairs for our school buses and support vehicles. It's $12,883,000. This again goes back to what I talked about earlier. It's a repeat, but I think it's critical that we make sure we start looking at how do we create a replacement for our support vehicles as well as our vehicles. Again, I always like to attach it to safety. And then what's really critical also, again, the 21st century learning environment, we don't want to impact the start of school, for example, because of an aging fleet. If a bus does not pass inspection, then we have the possibility of having to struggle or do something really quickly to try to get buses engaged so our students can get to the sites. So again, we want to be proactive and start looking to have a plan in place and work the plan opposed to plan working us. That's what our goal is for that. So.
This also includes our delivery trucks, so remember that we have central kitchens where we prepare the food and then ship it to the 110 buildings, and so these vehicles are also included in there. Some of our vehicles look a lot like what you saw in the Flintstones, where the drivers actually have to use their feet to keep them moving because the floorboards have truly rusted away. So not only a safety but a utility consideration, and we knew this isn't a surprise to any of us. We knew that through those deferred maintenance at some point we would have to make a decision as a community to bring ourselves up to speed and plan for a regular cycle of refresh so we don't find ourselves in this position ever again.
And that's exactly the question that I had from a big picture. Certainly we have accumulated deferred maintenance. Does this budget proposal move us closer to catching up or keep us about where we are on that cycle, or is it something less than that? Obviously, those things are all things that or at least most of them, will cost more to take care of later rather than taking care of them now.
So that's President Baker, Board Member Brown, to answer your question, the budget proposal is the start of starting to address deferred maintenance issues. It's a 5-year plan, could continue out further. However, it's to start addressing those matters throughout our plan, through our assessments, through priority, and it's starting to address those. And also, for example, what you would find just in buildings and grounds, to give you one example. In buildings and grounds in that particular department, last year the budget ask was at $3 million. This year with the deferred maintenance, it goes up a little bit higher this year, around $14 million. So therefore, it's starting to address those roofs and asphalts and HVAC systems within our system. So it's a start of the plan to address those. Again, the deferred maintenance is at a point, it's two-phase. This dollar amount is simply for addressing, but the part of the address also is the deferred maintenance or preventive maintenance schedule, which ties in hand along with the training aspect of it, so that we can start making sure we're addressing issues as they move along.
One of the things, maybe to help illustrate that, on page 110, one of the things Vice President Cole had requested was that 5-year, kind of that spreadsheet, that ledger. So if you look at that on page 110, where it says equipment, you'll notice in FY17, right in the middle of that chart, there is a significant investment for that equipment next year. But as you go to the right, you can see it's much less to maintain. So we're going to need to invest heavily on the front end to bring us up to a place where we can have that refresh cycle that's consistent across time.
And I guess my next question then is it anticipated that over 5 years, and this is a 5-year budget, that we will be caught up with those things on which we're behind and will be, no?
No, it's anticipated that will be the going rate moving forward.
Okay.
In order to continue to refresh the equipment, keep it on cycle. But that's also why there's a heavier investment, like double the investment next year, but then tapers off to around $13-14 million from then forward.
Okay, thank you.
So on page 110 at the top, you have deferred maintenance to maintain district facilities. We just talked a bit about that. It's $32,165,778. Again, it's those life cycle items we just talked about: building renovations, building repairs, preventive maintenance to reduce operational costs. And so again, that's starting to put a plan in place so we can start moving towards addressing the envelope of our buildings, make sure we're maintaining those, and being proactive and with a schedule to address those concerns that we have. And the next section you see is contracted services of $27,204,264. And this contracted service is to support our buildings and ground staff, information technology, transportation service, fuel, utilities, and school resource officers. And this is items such as, one of the goals here in this system is also, when you look at contracted service for buildings and grounds, that's those items to help enhance our operations, such as when you have HVAC system breakdown, you might contract that out because of our staffing numbers. In some situations, it makes more sense when you look at the analysis to contract it out so our staff can stay on task with preventive maintenance in some cases. But again, it's working in tandem. One of the things we're doing with that, I think is critical to point here, with that we're putting in service agreements and setting expectations and standards. With any vendor we come in, we're requesting them to make sure they review our service agreements, our expectations and standards, and then they will sign off on that, and then we hold them accountable. So we manage them, so we hold them the same expectations that we will hold our internal staff as we move forward. Our expected outcome in business operation is the business operation department will deliver exceptional customer service, build relationships, and monitor operation controls by providing a caring and effective infrastructure that makes learning possible for all. And when I say possible for all, not only students, but also learning possible for all for our staff, any guests or visitors who enter our facilities. You know, we're not preaching to the choir, but we're also looking at other partnerships with our early childhood learning. That's why we all truly mean all here in the district. So, and then below you see, we already touched briefly on it, just talks about the before FY14, moves it through the FY17 through FY21 of our 5-year projection of what we're looking to do in business and operations.
Thank you, Mr. Oldham. Are there questions from board members? Mr. Peretti?
I just need clarified on this. These are all general revenue fund dollars, even the ones with the asterisks that say may qualify. Now, will the ad hoc committee be presented with some options dealing with deferred maintenance and different options that we may be looking at from that perspective as well, if we're considering this?
President Baker, to Board Member Peretti, certainly to the extent that some of these buildings may be replaced or renovated, or perhaps even identified as ones the board may want to part company with, that would implicate this. But right now, under our current circumstances, this is our investment request to maintain what we currently have.
Okay.
And it is such a good question, because you'll notice again, all of the asterisks indicate capital eligible investments.
And just one call out, you don't see it, and I don't want to go too much in the weeds, but what's critical when you ask that question, in our capital improvements budget, we have an ask for this FY17, but moving forward, we didn't ask any dollars depending on the outcome of the facilities master plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? All right, Mr. Superintendent.
Continue. Capital improvements? Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, who's next?
Thank you, Mr. Oldham.
Thank you.
Would the treasurer note the arrival of Ms. Reyes and Ms. Hudson? And at this time, unless there's an objection, I'd like to offer Ms. Hudson the opportunity to provide any comments she might like to as chair of FAC.
Thank you, President Baker. I would just offer my sincere apologies for it being Monday. But I had a few fires going on. But I want to thank the staff and especially the budget team for putting together this revised document. I will just let everyone know and note for the board, the finance committee or outside members have been very involved and engaged with this to try to lift out information for us, and the presentation format. The other was a concern, and their big concern was to identify and help us begin to kind of pull apart what was capital, what might be capital dollars versus operating dollars, so we could begin to plan accordingly around those dollars. So with that, I appreciate it, but again, I apologize for my tardiness. No need. I know we'll be over this a couple more times, so at least I will be.
Academic services now.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share the Department of Academic Services budget requests for the fiscal year 17. I believe our information starts on page 42. In terms of our 5-year vision, the vision for academic services is to build leadership capacity and to transform lives and communities. That being said, in the next 5 years, we strive to empower the leaders across our district to provide rich learning experiences for all learners, both students and adults, by aligning our instructional resources, increasing student access to technology of the 21st century, and strengthening our partnerships with our families, business partners, and other institutions of learning. We also strive to empower our students and families to become the architects of their own learning by monitoring their own acquisition of skills and content that lead them to their goals and aspirations. Our fiscal year 17 budget request is $26,316,233, most of which falls into the categories of purchase services and supplies and materials. Our key investments within the academic services include $1,760,145 in purchase services to support the work of City Year and Diplomas Now. City Year, who works with our most at-risk schools and helps students to overcome both academic and non-academic barriers to success. And Diplomas Now, who brings their own curriculum and efforts to support both teachers and struggling students. We're requesting $1,656,000 in technical equipment to purchase a Chromebook cart for each grade level in grades 5 through 8 in each building. We're requesting $1,138,999 in purchase services, which will provide internet support and other supports for a computer-based adaptive reading and writing intervention tool, as well as an online assessment creator. We're requesting $265,952 in purchase services to support the partnership between Wineland Park Elementary School, the Schoenbaum Family Center, and The Ohio State University. We're requesting $484,000 in purchase services to support our certificated staff's professional development through outreach courses with area universities and to continue to support our principals and principal supervisors as they maintain their credentials for the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System and the Ohio Principal Evaluation System. $220,000 in equipment to purchase science probeware in a 21st century science classroom. $600,000 in supplies and materials to begin refreshing our school libraries. $568,000 in equipment to begin purchasing 3D printers and other forms of technology for our school libraries. $4,750,000 in supplies and materials for the adoption of a new reading resources and curriculum and textbook for our kindergarten through grade 5 programs. $1,280,509 in purchase services to support the I Know I Can counselors and initiatives. $1,474,000 in purchase services to pay for our special education students who require services that are provided by outside agencies. These funds will also support the YMCA Truancy Center and their efforts to support our students who may be truant from school. $423,250 in supplies and materials to support the purchase of online diagnostic assessments to be used for special education evaluations, as well as services to help better align the current PEAK program with PBIS models that are in place in each of our schools. $500,000 in purchase services to support our district's priority schools. $535,000 in supplies and materials to cover tuition costs under the College Credit Plus program and with the DeVry Advantage Academy, and $420,000 in purchase services to support the work of athletic trainers and our student athletes. Those major budget requests that fall into those categories that Dr. Good discussed, $3,582,999 would go towards the support of the 21st century digital capacity for teaching and learning. $484,000 would go towards the support of strategic professional development for all employees. I think it is important to call out that there are plenty of other professional development dollars in our request, but many of the various categories are specific initiatives with targeted populations of staff members, not just open to all staff. $4,750,000 again would go towards the procurement of textbooks, and $5,700,606 would be earmarked for contracted services. Our outcomes through this budget cycle include the supporting of the academic growth of our students in all subject areas, but most specifically in reading and mathematics, supporting the increase in our graduation rate, supporting the increase of our matriculation rates as students advance from one grade to another, and supporting an increase in our attendance rates as well as decreasing those discipline rates. And that is the academic services budget in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And are there questions from board members? Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. Baker. This is outstanding. I love particularly the outcomes that have been identified. I have a question about the 5% projected increase in graduation rates. Is that for high school, or is that kind of across the board between 8th grade? And how does ODE identify graduation rate?
Those would be looking at cohorts of students. So as students enter the 9th grade, they're placed into their cohort graduation rate, and that's what's calculated. It's always important to remember that our graduation rates are always calculated a year behind. So as we look at a particular year's graduation rate, it's always data that's about a year old. It takes that long to pull all that data together and get it calculated for the report card purposes.
And there is a second metric that the department identifies, and that's the 5-year graduation as well.
So Dr. Good, will we be, so obviously we're gonna be keeping track of this, so how will we have access to where we're at with this goal? And you're saying 20% increase in the number, 1 year's growth, so are we gonna be seeing some sort of reporting tool, either online, or is that something you're gonna be bringing to the board table so that we know where we're at?
President Baker to Board Member Reyes, both and. In fact, this morning in our senior leadership team, we had a robust presentation on the new dashboard, and phase 1 of that dashboard makes that real-time data available to any of our public, and phase 2 will begin to include the achievement data, phase 3 the fiscal data. So we're very excited. I believe Board Member Hudson had an opportunity to get a preview of that, and we'll share that with the rest of you. But it will be available at your fingertips, but of course we can do quarterly reports as well, and then the annual report. We already collect and measure this presently.
That'll be on our app.
It could be linked to from your app, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Peretti?
The programs like I Know I Can, City Year, and Diplomas now, are the current ask for fiscal year 17, is that an increase? Are we looking to ramp up sort of those programs?
I know with Freddie, I know with one of the programs it is a significant increase only because we did an increase in the services for this year.
Yeah.
And so this year's budget request does reflect that increase that from what we added to at the start of the school year. If we have specific questions on Diplomas Now or City Year, I'd certainly welcome Sandy Donald to come up and she can address those questions. If questions about I Know I Can, we'll have Kathy Leffler come up and she can address those.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's such a good question too, and this was one of, when people ask what I've learned about an urban district is one size isn't going to fit all. So City Year may be entirely appropriate intervention for this building, but because of the structure and other wraparound services that occur in building number 2, it may not be the right solution. So we talk about ramping up, but we only ramp up where there's a high predictability that it's going to change the effect size of student achievement, behavior, or course completion. And those are the 3 measures that we use, particularly for City Year, Diplomas Now, and the Johns Hopkins Initiative. I'm sorry, go ahead. They've trained me well.
President Baker, Board Member Peretti, we did not do an increase in the ask for city year or diplomas down. We're maintaining those programs at the current locations where they can be found.
And then I know I can is an increase from 16.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
So I believe Ms. Leffler's going to speak to the I know I can.
President,
Yes.
Baker, Vice President, Cole, members of the board, I know I can does not reflect an increase. It's a 3% increase, just like cost of living over the next years, but it does not have an increase in it.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Hudson? Did that answer your question, Mr. Peretti? Did that answer your question? Okay. Ms. Hudson, and then
I have a
believe...
separate question, but I think that Ms. Gibbs has a question.
Okay, so I should tell everyone, because I do believe I forgot to mention this, Ms. Gibbs is joining us by phone. Yes, and I think Ms. Gibbs has a question.
Thank you, and thank you for your work on the budget. My first question for you is around the 3D printers. Where do you envision we're using those, and are they a part of a specialty program? Or those 3D printers, is it an extension of a STEM program, or we're just putting them in schools for what purpose?
Sure. President Baker, to Ms. Gibbs' question, the 3D printer request is actually coming out of our Library Media Services OPU. And so the idea there is to start to begin to transform our libraries into 21st century learning spaces, including maker spaces, where students can go in and actually create an experiment in those libraries, rather than just checking out books and checking out resources, but actually using them for their own 21st century learning.
So in your professional development, that's a highly specialized piece of equipment, and it's been used in our STEM programs, but I've also seen them just sitting there. So do you have professional development for the library team? Who you envision being trained to help our students learn how to use that equipment? Because it's a significant investment.
Sure, President Baker, to Ms. Gibbs' question, certainly beginning with that library team so that they know how that equipment functions and works, and then from there rolling it out to our teachers and our students so that they can use that technology as part of their learning and not just as another piece of equipment sitting in the room.
Okay. The second question is around the partnership with the Schoenbaum Center. In your presentation, we are making an investment there. Are we making an equitable and equal investment with any other early childhood centers? And are we making an investment like that that would serve more than just the Wyland Park area, or all of that is just for that one center?
President Baker, to Ms. Gibbs' question regarding the Schoenbaum Center, that budget request is specifically for the Schoenbaum Center and the relationship between Columbus City Schools, the Schoenbaum Center, and The Ohio State University. That does cover the cost of the program of having those students in the center, as well as opportunities for professional development for our staff, and as well opportunities for the Wineland Park community to be involved in parent engagement activities. Certainly through other dollars that we've requested through teaching and learning and through special education, there are other budget requests that also impact early childhood education, and those would be found in those other OPUs aside from that one. That was just one piece, one call out, I'm sorry, major and key investment.
I think there's another value-added proposition there, because the work between Columbus City Schools, the Ohio State University at the Schoenbaum Center also serves as a research model for the Crane Center for Early Learning. Those learnings are being applied to our other early learning sites, and we have 37 of those, remember, and as well we'll propose to the board the opening of that pre-kindergarten center in the Linden area, and using some of those best practices and research-based practices that have been learned at that site. So it's an investment in research that is able to be scaled to our other locations.
Okay, Okay, and one last question, thank you for that. I see that we have an elementary textbook adoption.
Yes.
Yes, and will that textbook adoption and are all of our textbooks currently aligned to state standards? So are our middle school books aligned, the elementary school books aligned? Is everybody using text material that's aligned to state standards?
President Baker, Board Member Gibbs, as you stated, we do have a request for funding for an elementary textbook adoption this year. As you know, you generously approved a math textbook adoption last year, which gave us aligned resources K-12 for math. We have also established a textbook adoption timeline. So each year we have a focused or a different content area that we will be piloting materials for and then making a selection for aligned resources.
So that means what? So everybody does have
No, currently,
textbooks that are done?
so with the new Ohio content standards were adopted in 2010. We have aligned resources for math. We're piloting currently reading, and then each year thereafter we will be rolling out or making a request for funding for each of the other disciplines. So our next one after next year will be the middle and high school reading textbook adoption. The year after, I believe, is science and then social studies.
Okay, so that leads me to ask just one more question.
Sure.
If we don't have them, and we have priority schools, do our priority schools have textbooks that are at standard?
So,
If not, what? If we have priority schools and we're investing in them, are their materials up to date?
So the materials that we have for schools are all the same. However, we do supplement with different resources. It may not be a system-wide brand new textbook adoption, but we certainly supplement with curriculum and with aligned resources. So it may be a workbook or other materials, other supplemental materials, but it's not an actual textbook adoption. And then buildings also purchase different materials to use in classrooms at the request of teachers or decisions that they make with the principal and their building leadership team.
To Ms. Gibbs, this is a good example of why the investment in level libraries or level literacy was important in our district. So if Ms. Johnson and I, Director Johnson and I were in the same class, in fourth grade class, she's reading at the sixth grade level, but I'm only reading at the second grade level, we can both study earth science at our readability because we have books that are written at our comprehension and fluency levels. So it doesn't compromise a child's opportunity to assimilate new knowledge because they're actually reading it at their reading level. And of course, those reading materials also stretch them, so they begin to what we call scaffold their learning and move to the next level. But that way, Ms. Johnson or Director Johnson and I can participate in the same conversations, even though we're reading at 4 grade levels apart. So those sorts of supplemental materials are available at buildings.
Mr. President.
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you for that. Just one more question. In terms of, so if that material's that way, and we're putting the printers and the material in the library, but if I'm right, only high school has full-time librarians. So how will the elementary and the middle school, the buildings that do not have full-time librarians, be able to access and leverage those resources?
President Baker, Board Member Gibbs, high schools have full-time librarians and elementaries have full-time library assistants. Middle schools have librarians, and the goal is not just for the librarian to be trained on how to use the resource. The goal is for additional staff to be trained, so in the absence of the librarian, or if it's a day that the library is not open, that it is still able to be used by teachers and by students. So the goal is to provide professional development for more than the librarian.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I think
Mr.
Board
Vice
Member
President?
Hudson had a question about
Ms. Hudson?
Thank you, President Baker. It's fine. I have a question. I'll go back to the textbook issue, and I look at the Chromebook rollout, the grade, Chromebook by grade, and then the book purchase. And I'm just wondering if there's been an analysis or how these two align. If we bought more Chromebooks, could we have textbook, if more students had Chromebooks rather than one cart per grade, that it was, a Chromebook per student, oh, you did, oh, okay. What was the answer? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, the question is yes.
The superintendent spoke about a combined curriculum,
Yeah,
was it?
correct. Okay, sorry.
It's
That's-
okay. Do you want me to do it again?
We can, you know what, we
Do I
can
have to-
talk offline about it then. Thank you.
It's a good question.
It is a great question. In fact, the question I anticipated from the board, and I'm certain you would ask it ultimately, was with the acquisition of additional mobile devices, what ends up being our ratio of digital device to student? And I know Director Van Dyke has been taking a look at that and has some thoughts about that. It isn't as clean as a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 correspondence, because remember, we have stationary labs, we have Chromebooks, we have iPads, we have a number of different digital devices, and oftentimes those devices support a particular pedagogy or methodology. So it isn't like I can issue a Chromebook to Director Johnson and expect she'll be able to do all the applications on that Chromebook. It may in fact be for her gifted acceleration, it requires the use of an iPad. So sometimes they're very program specific, kind of replacing that need for a textbook. Other times they're more general in terms of being able to access the internet, put your own files in the cloud. So it's a little more multifaceted, I think. Am I doing okay with that? Because I made up most of that, and I just no, I'm kidding. No, we did talk about this.
Are they, just a follow-up to that, are those Chromebooks then assigned by classroom as opposed to by student?
Yeah.
And is that I guess is that the most effective and efficient way to do all of this? Because I think getting the technology in the hands of the students is so important.
Director Van Dyke.
Board member, or President Baker to Board member Hudson, I think exactly what Dr. Good was saying. It absolutely depends on the program at this point. With having wireless in all of the buildings, it doesn't have to be assigned by a classroom, and nor does it have to be assigned by having the cart in a certain place. You can have, I think what we've been looking at a lot with the curriculum group is blended learning approaches, where you may use 6 Chromebook devices, and you may have a station also, and jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but you may have 4 or 5 stationary devices. It really, really depends right now on the program that you're learning. In our lab settings, obviously we need not only thin clients, but sometimes we need a traditional computer. Our engineering programs, for one, they would run on nothing but a traditional computer. So it really, really depends on what we have in the, what program we're offering. So I'm not sure that completely answers your question, but as far as textbooks,
I guess how would we look at it to say to the public that these resources, whether they're the hard copy textbooks or the Chromebooks being used in the classrooms, are aligned in a way that is most effective for the student, but is efficient, and we don't have Chromebooks everywhere, because I know we don't. But we don't have Chromebooks everywhere, and then because a lot of folks I think would also say, well, why can't you have that on your the textbooks on the Chromebook? So I think we've got to have that answer, or have a little, what I'm not hearing is the explanation of that alignment. Does that make sense?
President Baker, to Ms. Hudson's question, I think a lot of that too also falls in looking at some of the resources that we've been able to bring into the district in the last year or so, looking at the formative assessment piece that is completely done online, looking at some of the interventions we've purchased. There's one significant intervention that works very well in mathematics that we have concrete data to show that increased time with this intervention causes students to reach a specific benchmark in a specific amount of time. And so by putting this technology in the hands of our students, they're going to be able to increase that time with the technology, and thus then have increased access to those interventions.
And I think I'm not suggesting it's not effective.
I think we have to have an explanation of why, is this at the level we need? What do we need, you know, how much more do we need? And then likewise, as we do these very large, very necessary, I understand necessary textbook buys as well. Like, is this all together, are we thinking about, we're thinking about this, yes, we're thinking about this, that we need both. And why, so that it's aligned.
So we,
Oh,
and
okay.
I think it would be good if maybe we could
All right,
talk a little bit afterwards, and we did talk about the research and the evidence base, and
Good.
we can use surveys of enacted curricula to actually demonstrate the alignment to the curricula of these particular tools, so.
Okay, thank you, I didn't mean to bring up a repeat.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent?
We'll next do accountability with Dr. Klein. Thank you for your questions, by the way.
Dr. Klein?
President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board, Internal Auditor Smith, Treasurer Behort, Superintendent Good, and Representative Rhonda Johnson, thank you so much for allowing the Department of Accountability
So page
to share.
95.
Thank you.
Just giving them the page number, sorry.
That
Go
was
ahead.
next, page 95.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
95.
If you'll refer to page 95, I'd just like to share with you who's made up in the Department of Accountability, because some of you may not know. The Department of Accountability incorporates Central Enrollment, the Division of Attendance and Data Reporting, the Registrar, the Division of School Choice, the Division of School Options, the Division of Information Management, which includes Infinite Campus and EMIS, the Division of Testing and Program Evaluation, and the Division of Alternative Education. So as you can see, we have a very diverse group within the division, within the Department of Accountability. There are three very high-level, 20,000-foot items that I would like to share with you with regard to our vision for our 5-year vision. The first is that of formative assessment. Formative assessment can help transform our district and can allow us to empower, by using data, can empower the district and the administrators to actually use formative assessment data to change and grow instructional practices. Through using that data, we can learn the best practices, and then we can actually use those to replicate them in other buildings within our city school district. Obviously, with adopting NWA MAP this past year, we have seen a huge increase in the use of specific data being used by our building principals. It's very exciting for me to go to data walks now and listen to principals talking about, well, I have my stretch goal and we made our stretch goal. Did you make yours? It's very synergizing, and it allows you to really understand what's happening within the schools. So formative assessment is one of our big highlights. The second is data integrity. And we want to provide accurate data, analytics, and statistical analysis in order to collect, analyze, track, and report student and district data for our parents, for our schools, for our community members, for everybody. And part of that is our new district dashboard, which is called Columbus City School D², which you'll learn about very shortly. The third 5-year vision is unsurpassed customer service. So we want our Central Enrollment Center to have unsurpassed customer service at Central Enrollment, which means one-stop shopping for our parents, providing kiosks, providing health services, transportation information, enrollment, school choice information, transcripts, special education reviews, ESL assessments, and work permits. As you can see from our budget requests, the Department of Accountability has 8 pretty huge key investments. The first is purchase services through excess costs, tuition paid to other districts. These are costs associated with the tuition of general education students who are placed outside of the Columbus City School District due to very unique circumstances, such as those with foster care, incarcerations, treatment facilities, those types of things. Columbus City Schools is required to provide the financial support for these students. That cost is estimated at $4,644,874. The second key investment is that of purchase services through open enrollment payments. Now this one I have some specific data that I want to highlight for you. Just pulled off today, off of the open enrollment payments, we have a total today of 519 students at $6,000 per student going out. We need to find a way to bring these students back. Our largest receiving district is Reynoldsburg City School District with 437 students currently going outside our district. Those payments are estimated at $3,600,000. The third key investment is $2,400,000 in purchase services for special education excess costs. These costs are associated with the tuition of special education students who are placed outside of Columbus City Schools due to the unique circumstances and situations, such as foster care, incarcerations, treatment facilities. Again, state law requires CCS to pay for the educational services of these particular students. The fourth key investment is purchase services payments to community schools at $195,733,874. These costs are associated with the tuition of students who choose to attend a community or charter school but who reside within the Columbus City School attendance area. Again, Columbus City Schools is required to pay this particular amount. I have some data that I just pulled off this morning. First thing about 6 a.m. this morning for you with regard to community schools. And I do want to share with you, God bless you, the difference in community schools. So we have what we call a community school active today and a community school active and withdrawal. And I want to share with you the difference and how when someone asks me how many kids do we really have in community schools, it's very difficult to answer. And that's because just from this school year, since the end of August, we have in the active and withdrawn 29,095 students. But in the currently active today category, we only have 26,304, which leaves us a difference of over 2,791 students. So those are students that go and come. They may be here tomorrow, they may be gone the following day. So it's very important to keep that in mind.
Mr. Vice President?
Dr. Klein, can you share with me those? So the 29,095 is active what?
29,095 students are both active and withdrawn students. So maybe they started at ECOT at the beginning of the year, and maybe they're right here in Columbus City Schools right now.
Got you. And the other indicator was active?
Currently active at a community school, and that was 26,304. If you'd like those numbers, sir, I can provide those to you by community school.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll get those to Mr. Benton. The next major key investment for us is $810,961. That's purchase services through our contract services to support the district's K through 12 formative assessment, NWA MAP implementation, and the state required achievement testing for gifted identification. This also includes the use of Nagliera and the Terra Nova InView testing materials for students and teachers. The next key investment is purchase services, professional services, and software for collecting, analyzing, and reporting district assessment, student, and operational data, such as the SAS tool and Learning Circle. The seventh key investment is $475,000 for purchase services, alternative education, which is our K-12 online curriculum, which supports our virtual credit advancement program, or VCAP as most people know it, as well as extended learning opportunities, ELO programming, which provide instructional resources for the intervention and enrichment needs of all of our students. Yes, sir.
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, sir. Dr. Klein, I wanted to go back to the purchase services for testing and program evaluation.
Yes, sir.
Specifically with the assessment of identifying gifted and talented students. These two tests that we make available don't have any issues with cultural bias, is that correct?
That is correct. That's actually why we adopted the Nagliera.
I just wanted to point that out and say thank you again for being so very sensitive to that that issue.
And yes, sir, and just so you know, we will actually expand that in years to come. It will change. Remember, we don't want to change assessments too many too fast in 1 year. So there's actually a 5-year rollout plan that is addressed within our budget.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for asking. So the $475,000 is currently in an RFP. Most of you probably realize we use Edmonton Plato at the current time for our online support. However, we don't know that they will continue to be our particular vendor or not, and that is certainly something that we're working closely with Dennis Carney on in purchase services. The last key investment is $464,633. That's for the licensing, support, and maintenance of our student information management system, better known as Infinite Campus. So those are the key investments. I would like to turn your attention to the outcomes that are listed on page 98 because they are near and dear to my heart because I think we should always be measuring things. So one of the highlights for our outcomes that I want to share is we are truly committed that we are going to increase and demonstrate accuracy rate of 80% or greater relative to our quarterly attendance data verification checks regarding the number of documented and verified absences for excused absences. And so one of those things you may remember from the Auditor of State and the internal auditor is that we weren't really hitting our benchmarks the way we want to be. Well, we have really taken the board's investment and gone out with our student information specialist and our student attendance specialist, and we are working each and every day in the buildings and helping the secretaries and the attendance teams to make sure that their data is accurate and that it's reflective of not only our policy but our administrative guidelines within Columbus City Schools. The second outcome.
Dr. Klein, yes, Mr.
Yes,
Brown?
sir. Board Member Brown?
The 80%, what's the basis for that number?
Sure. Well, let me share with you my philosophy. We have been doing quarterly data checks for the last 2 years, you may have realized. And some of our schools, unfortunately, and I can give you that individual data, but some of our schools are hitting between 35 and 40% with accuracy. And so what I did is I took all of them and then I upped the ante by 20% because I believe that we should be accountable for every child's absence every single day.
Are there any guidelines for what this percentage should be?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, Board Member Brown. What I would say is that no, there are not. And in fact, I have talked to the Auditor of State with regard to that, and there aren't any norms set for a public school system like this. But what I do want to share with you is that 80% is actually based on what I think we ought to be doing of a perfect nature. And I share that with you because when the internal auditor and the Auditor of State helped me understand those control checks, I want to share with you that that doesn't mean that 20% is going by the wayside. Let me share a specific example for you so that you understand. So if we have a withdrawal, and we have withdrawn a student correctly, we should have the correct EMIS code, the correct dates, everything should be recorded accurately. But do you know the difference between an 81 and an 82 is 1 keystroke? And so there could be a typographical error. So when the Auditor of State or the internal auditor might say that we have an error, it may not be due to a withdrawal error. It may be due to a typographical error. So that 80% gives me a little bit of wiggle room, but still holds me accountable to each and every student.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm excited about seeing, raising the bar, if you will. That's kind of the salient I draw from this. With regard to that, though, how does this, we made some great strides in terms of some very key indicators, the 20% increase, the A grade we got in that. How does what you're trying to do and your goals relate to the Ohio report card? How are we going to see that impact our overall grade levels for our schools in any number of their indicators? Where are we going to see increases?
President Baker, to Board Member Cole's question, I guess, sir, with all due respect, I'd have to say that if a student isn't in attendance at school, they're never going to learn. And so Dave Baker can't make his goals unless we get him there. And so we are actually launching a really great attendance campaign in cooperation with our mentoring partnerships for next school year. And this will be part of our attendance campaign to make sure that our kids in school, because every minute matters. And if we can't get our kids there, they're not going to be able to learn.
Oh. Yeah, please.
So we're also in the position as the state's largest district in the capital city, and because of our relationship with the Ohio Department of Education, of being able to advocate for changes in that local report card. And we're doing that in conjunction with and on behalf of the Ohio 8, which are the large urban 8 districts in the state, to make certain there are other indicators such as those identified here that are also reported to our community, because what we've heard through the listening tour, through the commission's work, is they don't only want to know whether in fact we've met the threshold in 5th grade on social studies. They also want to know about attendance and want to know about our progress. You remember we got our A in value added, we got an A in gifted value added, and they're interested in that as well. And there's a lot of discussion about whether any district should have a single letter grade anymore to kind of profile them. Doesn't it make more sense to have a composite of achievements and opportunities for growth? So through the collection of this sort of data, it gives us a good foundation for advocating for a more holistic view and presentation of the district to our community. So it's a good question, but the fidelity, the accuracy of that data is paramount. So that's why you see there's a considerable investment in this particular initiative.
So our second outcome actually is specific to the fidelity of that data. So we have to make sure that our secretaries are armed with all of the power and all of the data that they need to enter attendance correctly within the Infinite Campus system. And so we want to make sure that we've not only given them the training, but that we've done what I call a control check, what the internal auditor has taught me so very well, to be able to establish whether or not they have the competency to actually complete that work. And so, do you want me to stop? And so one of the things that we have established are knowledge assessments, which allow us to ascertain whether or not those secretaries are able to actually complete that job with integrity and that they are able to get it. If they are not able to and they cannot pass the knowledge assessment, we provide them with a wealth of additional training. We provide them not only with videos, but in-person exercises that we go out to, that we bring them in for training. This is not trying to get rid of someone. This is trying to empower them with the knowledge to be able to do their job in the best way they possibly can.
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you so much for mentioning this. I think it's important that the community that is listening or have the opportunity to see this meeting and hear it clearly understand that this specific issue is relative to how we have righted the ship, if you will, in terms of accountability in our buildings for data collection and dissemination or articulating that to the community. So my question is this: who does the buck stop with? Does it stop with the principal, or does it stop with the secretary who got the training?
The buck stops with the principal, because remember, the principal has to verify the data. So we have actually given them some tools to be able to do that. Our Infinite Campus team, Jason Vance and his team, have actually allowed them, or empowered them, I should say, to be able to run reports. Let me give you a quick example. So we have a lot of grade changes right now that Mr. O'Reilly and I have been processing for school years 2012, 13, 13, 14, et cetera, et cetera. We're no longer going to have to do that, because what we now have in place are systems for principals to be able to check. So I have a missing grade report. So every principal can run their missing grade report before grade cards are put out. So if Mr. Gary Baker doesn't have a grade for Math 2, I'm going to know it, and then I can go see that teacher. So we have just given them some additional tools so that they'll be able to know if their data is correct or not before it goes out to the public, before it goes home to parents. So it's just an extra tool that they can put in their tool belt. The next particular outcome is to reduce our wait time at central enrollment. So you may remember 2 years ago we had long lines and all kinds of news media with regard to that. We've really significantly been able to cut that. Dr. Eric Rausch and Mrs. Tanya Freeman had recommended a year and a half ago to Dr. Goodenknife to establish a Ventus Nemo Q system. We were a little hesitant about it, to be honest, and it has really shined a huge light at Central Enrollment. It is a very smart way to do business. Parents can make an appointment. They can have a specific 15-minute increment of time in which they have their appointment, and that way they can get in and get out very quickly and efficiently. So we want them to be able to get in and out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The next major outcome is for all school buildings to participate in their BOI, MOI, and OIs at 92% or greater for all eligible students. That's with regard to the formative assessment, NWA MAP. So what this can do for us, it can allow people at the district level, people at the building level, to look at the data and then analyze it as to the strengths and needs and areas, opportunities of improvement for each and every student by substrand. This can transform our instructional practices for Mrs. Donald and her team so that teaching and learning can know exactly what they need to teach and reteach in order to move the needle on student achievement. And then
Yes. Mr. Brown?
I was going to ask earlier or later, wherever it fits, but can you give me a very short summary of what the formative assessment is?
Sure, I would be glad to. President Baker, to Board Member Brown's question. So NWA MAP is a formative assessment. It was actually selected 2 years ago by a team. So a team said I had never used NWA MAP before, and we actually did a product review from multiple assessments to establish what would be best for Columbus City Schools. So what this tool does is, it is all electronic, by the way, sir. And so what it does is it allows our students to get on a computer and to take a formative assessment to find out where they are with regard to specific areas in the content areas of math and English language arts. That actually gives reports not only to their classroom teacher by strands, but also gives information back to the building principals and to the executive director so that they can look at the district from a 20,000-foot level. It can have curricular implications that can adjust the way maybe Leslie Kelly or Sandy Donald move their money to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our greatest amount of students. Better yet, because it's all electronic, we can actually disaggregate that data very quickly by ethnicity, by gender, by students that are in certain cohorts, and it allows us to do some very deep analysis.
But I guess in listening, this is not a program or a tool for individual assessment.
Yes, sir, it is
does that
individual
too.
assessments. Yes, sir.
Okay, it does both. is what you're
Yes, so parents also get a parent report as well. And you do this test usually 3 or 4 times a year, depending if you're also doing a summer program or not. But the BOI is the beginning of the year, the MOI the middle of the year, and the OI the end of the year. And it allows us to make goals, not only by student, but even more importantly by grade level, by content area, so that we can establish, this time next year we'll be able to say, we need X amount of percentage in order to have a positive trajectory towards passing the AIR test. And this is the percentage we need.
Okay.
Yes.
President Baker to Board Member Brown. So from a policy perspective, this is important as well. The state actually approves a number of alternative assessments that districts can select from, which we piloted and then selected. But the landscape for state standardized testing since 2001 has changed 8 times. So in just 15 years, we've had 8 different assessments. And you can see it's very difficult to compare apple to apple to apple as we chart the progress of a student through a K through 12 system. So by Columbus investing in this particular tool, one that has good psychometric characteristics, will be able to have that longitudinal perspective and make the very corrections that Dr. Klein indicated Ms. McDonald would do, or Ms. Donald, not McDonald, Ms. Donald would do.
When did we start this particular assessment program?
We piloted it the year before and we started it this year in K-8 formative assessment. Keep in mind that this is also a company that the year before we did not have a metric to use as an alternative for 3rd grade reading. They gave us this product for free to try because we weren't really sure if they could handle an urban district as great as we are. And so we put it to the test, and we were pretty proud of that. One thing I do want to share, especially with Representative Johnson sitting here, this is so important to me. She said to me 2.5 years ago, you know, Michelle, the district's really, really good at bringing around these new things, and then all of a sudden we don't do any professional development, and it just kind of goes by the wayside and dies, and we don't support our teachers. And I said, Rhonda, I promise you, that's not going to happen. And I'm so proud of Dr. Keith Harris's program and Artosa, Shannon Clemens, and the formative assessment that they've been able to bring in the professional development that we have been able to instill in our elementary, our middle school, and our high school. And remember, we only did this formative assessment K-8 this year. We have got over half of our high schools that voluntarily did it because they value what's going on. They want the professional development. Now, what a good problem. They want professional development. Thank you for that.
So, and it will not be a problem. In this budget, not only will you have seen the purchase service associated with professional development, but most of our costs associated with professional development come from releasing our faculty and staff from their current positions and hiring substitutes. So most of the funding request will come through the personnel budget request, which is not this one. That will happen in April.
And then, thank you, yes. And then the very last outcome that I'd just like to highlight, one of the issues for our principals and teachers and our K-12 systems is that of a testing calendar. And I'm very proud that the state of Ohio has reduced our testing by over 51% this year, and that we do have some relief in that particular nature. But Dr. Keith Harris is not only making the testing assessment calendar available, but also they will have the timelines available for all of the professional development prior to next school year, so that everything is laid out well in advance for academic services, so that everything can be aligned. Any questions that I could entertain for anyone, please?
Any other questions from board members for Dr. Klein? Thank you, Dr. Klein.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Superintendent?
So we'll move on to the Treasurer's Department. Rick?
Yes. Thank you, President Baker, members of the board. We're on page 144 as I see it. Not quite as exciting as some of the other presentations, but our operation is here to provide for the accounting and reporting of all the financial activities of the school district. Our vision for the next 5 years is to continue to maintain and enhance and further employ the programs available through our enterprise resource planning software, enhance our timekeeping rollout, and update some desktop hardware and software as needed. And as I said, provide for collection of cash throughout the district and account and distribute all payroll and accounts payable activities for the district. In our budget this year, it's for 17 will be $13,623,500. That's the request, and the vast majority of that, over 92% of that, is involved in the one of Board Member Hudson's favorite categories of other, which is the 800 and 900 objects. And this has to do with county auditor and treasurer fees, outside audit fees, and several transfers that we do for bus debt service and the contribution to the athletic program. The next largest contribution out of our budget is $740,000 in the area of purchase services, primarily for software maintenance and enhancements, armored courier services, and the preparation of our comprehensive annual financial report that is distributed each year. Recategorizing that under the areas that Dr. Good pointed out, under major budget requests, under strategic professional and development for all of the employees in the office, we have budgeted $35,000 for fiscal 17. This has to do with going to an annual conference that Tyler puts on for our Munis training, required investment training for the Treasurer of State's office for a couple of us in the department, and other professional association conference attendance. And under contracted services, One of the largest items is $740,000, and that again is for software maintenance and enhancements, our armored courier services, and again, preparation of various reports. As far as outcomes for our department, one of the key ones is hopefully everybody gets paid on time in the future and is paid accurately. But certainly we, as I mentioned, we will continue the expansion of our Kronos timekeeping system to include additional employee groups. We will finish the migration of that software to the cloud, which will ensure some reliable connectivity and expand accessibility to allow for remote input of our time and supervisory approval, which should, as you may have heard from one of our external and internal audit reports, we need to improve that supervisory approval of that time. And also outcomes will be that the numerous recommendations from various audits, both internal and external, will be addressed, including meeting the 24-hour deposit law, more efficient completion of time and effort documentation and related corrections that have been mentioned over the years, and then again ensuring that there's proper authorization for time and attendance for payroll. And also I think what we haven't costed this out yet, so we've made a reasonable guess for this, but we'll be creating written procedural manuals for the office, so that will have to be a contracted service.
Any questions for the treasurer? Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Our next department will be the internal auditors.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board. The budget is on page 149, and the internal audit department's 5-year vision. The office will recruit, identify, and retain highly skilled audit professionals who demonstrate the competencies necessary to assist management as we proactively identify control weaknesses, fraud risk, and non-compliance risk. During the next 5 years, the office will continually improve our professional practices, as demonstrated by continued upward movement on the internal audit capability model and the internal audit data analytics and continuous auditing maturity model. The office will also dedicate more resources to fraud prevention, detection, and staff training, and increase responsibility for the IT audit function. Our budget request for FY17 is $167,992. 91% of that is to continue to purchase outside internal audit IT services. The purchase services to work with the firm to conduct a dedicated IT risk assessment and continue to audit those IT areas that have been identified as high risk. This investment is directly related to the significant impact IT has on district operations and the risk of increased cyber attacks and infrastructure failures. The next key investment of $15,000 is the continued investment in purchase services to develop data analytic scripts to be used to more effectively perform our risk assessments, analyze large amounts of data in a timely manner, and focus on our abnormal transactions that may indicate errors, irregularities, or fraud. Looking at this another way, the major budget request as far as 21st century digital capacity for teaching and learning, the investment in the IT audit will definitely support this initiative. We will review the security of data and equipment as we support the district's 21st century digital capacity for teaching and learning. As far as the second initiative, strategic professional development, all of the employees in the Office of Internal Audit will continue to receive professional development to the amount of $33,100. The next large budget request is in contracted services, and once again, $15,000 is requested to contract with ACL Consultants. The outcomes for the investment in IT audit purchase services by July 31st, 2017, the district will have a roadmap of which areas internal audit and IT should focus on to assess, identify, and mitigate high risk to district operations. The board will have a report that identifies prior high-risk areas and how effective our mitigation efforts have been. It is the expectation that these areas identified, audited, and management corrected from the 2014 review are at a lower risk rating by the end of the budget period. For the investment in data analytics, the office will be able to perform 100% review of certain accounts versus reliance on sampling and the risk of over or under reliance on the sample selection. By the end of the budget period, the office will be using data analytics scripts to identify account balances, anomalies, and assist in performing the risk assessment and developing the annual work plan. The office will also move higher on the data analytic maturity model. And I do want to point out, for FY17, you see a significant amount in purchases services, but it decreases over the years as it's my goal to rely more on my staff to do more of the IT audit versus outsourcing or co-sourcing that. So that's why you see a decrease in the out years.
Thank you, Madam Internal Auditor. Any questions from board members for the Internal Auditor? Thank you. Mr. Superintendent?
The next department is the Board of Education's budget. We have reduced that to 0? No.
Mr. Benton, Dr. Roush? Afternoon.
Page 155.
Thank you very much, President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board. We're here today to talk about the Board of Education and the Office of Board Services and Policy Government Affairs. The 5-year vision, the Columbus City Schools Board of Education will create a world-class model of public education that prepares members of our communities to reach their full potential. The Office of Board Services and Policy Government Affairs will continue to provide high-performing assistance to the board and the district by efficiently and effectively facilitating legislative outreach and advocacy, policy development, and administrative support to the board. The total FY17 requested budget is $142,900. Some of the key investments under the Board of Education, under dues and fees, $65,000. This pays for membership to the Council of Great City Schools, to the National School Boards Association, and to the Ohio School Boards Association. Membership to these organizations not only allow us to access some of the great services and materials that these organizations provide, but also opens the doors for professional development for board members and for district staff. $18,000 for purchased services. This will enable us to continue our contract with Neola. As you all are aware, we moved to a new policy structure last year. Neola provides 2 updates per year, plus they host the information on their website. This pays for the hosting, the updates, and then additional hours for consultants on an as-needed basis. For Board Services and Policy Government Affairs, $6,000 supplies and materials. This pays for Gongwer News Service and for Congressional Quarterly, which are 2 news services that provide legislative bill tracking and information that assist us with our legislative advocacy efforts. And another $2,500 for supplies and materials, just general office supplies. We're small operations, so. Major budget requests. You've seen this as a theme throughout. Strategic professional development for all employees, $23,500. This supports board member travel and attendance at conferences, supports the travel for Mr. Benton and I to also attend conferences and professional development opportunities. And then contracted services, again, getting back to Neola, the services they provide, plus some additional funding available should we need it for search firm services or other professional contracted services as the need may arise. Outcomes, continue the use of cloud-based board docs to efficiently plan, prepare, and execute the work of the board in a semi-paperless environment. We're not totally paperless yet, but we're making progress. Support professional development of all staff, and then assist elected officials in drafting legislation that supports the work of the district.
Anything to add, Mr. Benton?
I do not. No, Dr. Roush did a wonderful job. Thank you.
We would be happy to take any questions you may have at this time.
Board member questions? Mr. Peretti?
So The 65,000 for dues and fees, is that on scale of the size of the district? Like, so do smaller districts, are they paying the same amount of money that we are for all these various associations that we belong to and participate in?
President Baker to Board Member Peretti, the largest amount there is the Council of Great City Schools. I will need to confirm and get back with you. I believe that is based on kind of the size of the district, because that does fluctuate from time to time, so I'll need to double check and get back to you on that point. The other two, I believe, are fairly static as far as the amount for the national school boards and Ohio school boards.
With respect to the great city schools, I would welcome an opportunity to take a look at, I guess, the benefits to Columbus City Schools and to our kids, to see, I don't know what the exact amount is of the 65,000 that's to them, but I'd like to see us do some sort of a review and take a look at that.
President Baker to Board Member Brown, we certainly could put something together. I can speak personally. I am in contact with the Council of Great City Schools probably 1 to 2 to, I think last week I was on the phone with them 3 or 4 times. They're on the ground in Washington with the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. They're a great resource right now, helping us build capacity for the implementation now that more of that's coming to the state. I know that other members of our staff participate, such as their Chief Public Information Officers Network, the Chief Food Directors Network. I think we're getting more staff involved at this point. They really provide a great amount of resource materials. I certainly encourage you to and we'll be happy to put together the resource, but I'd also encourage to, take a look at their website. They have a lot of great materials.
And to add to that, they also do a nice job of putting together model templates for policies that boards can take a look at and change, as they see fit at the local level.
So it's benefiting a lot of staff, administrative staff in particular, that Dr. Good, you were going to...
Mr. President.
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you. Without distilling, and thank you, you guys have done a great articulation of exactly what that organization does and benefit to this board and our students in Columbus City Schools. It also gives us as board members the opportunity to exchange best practices. In many ways, we've been able to do that. In fact, I believe it was Principal Jason Johnson and the partnership that we have with Columbus State Community College that we got to actually highlight nationally in terms of our work and our endeavors there and where we've been successful. We as a board get to see a number of issues addressed even for minority students, for underserved students in the district. We get to deliberate, if you will, or talk about what those issues are and identify them and bring back best practices. So there are tremendous benefits to this relationship.
On top of that, Mr. Cole, it also provides access to their data warehouse, which has very valuable pieces of data that when you're researching something, we can go to and pull nationwide numbers to reflect, where those are compared to the district.
So President Baker and to Board Member Brown, and not to belabor the point, but for example, just this morning, we were engaged in conversations we will be having with other Great City Schools districts relative to ESSA and the thoughts that 3% of the Title I allocation to states could be set aside for a state board of education or department to determine whether they were going to award it directly to districts or through a competitive grant application process. We certainly have specific positions we advocate and join our colleagues in the Great City Schools districts. Multiple or single assessments being used. You heard a beautiful presentation from Dr. Klein through Dr. Harris from Dr. Harris through Dr. Klein, I guess, about the value of having multiple assessments versus a single assessment to provide summative data. And so that's something that needs to be negotiated in ESSA right now. Non-academic indicators on the very local report card. Shouldn't we be including other things that are meaningful to our citizens as they've shared with us through the listening tour and other avenues? And so there are a number of those conversations we're having with our colleagues across the nation, and then we will actually be in DC at the end of next week, I believe, to begin to talk to congresspersons on the Hill. So it's
Very helpful.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Board Member Hudson.
Baker, I really, it's not a question for the panel so much as for colleagues. As you know, I've had issues with travel, and for me, it's not about training, and I certainly don't object to training. And I certainly know at times there are appropriate conferences. But there are kind of two pieces to this. One, I would like for us as a board to talk about and plan ahead of time who's going to conferences and why, and then what are we doing to bring that back for the rest of the board. But second, what is not in here, and whether it's part of the 23.5 or a separate line item to that, is some time for board training and retreat. So where would that expense be, for example, for Dr. Clark Ike, who did the training for us, or did the work with us, but to continue to do other training? I would contend that board training, that we cannot get appropriate best practices board training from any of these organizations, because I don't think the education organizations are current on best practices for boards and large entity boards and large enterprise boards. And we are doing some best and above best in practice efforts, like with this budget presentation. And I would just say, just to ask my colleagues, if we think about that, we could do that, we could bring that here for us as a board internally, and to start some of that, not because I think, you have to have a face at some of these efforts, you have to see what's going on, and I don't object to that. And sometimes you want to have representation at conferences or as part of those things, so that they're not going a direction that is harmful for us. Mm-hmm. And or contrary, I don't want to say harmful, contrary to maybe our goals and objectives. But I would just ask that either that item is there, or we identify a specific portion of this, of the budget request, that it's some internal training, so it makes clear to the community we're doing that as a whole, and it's not just random travel for board members.
So, Mr. Superintendent?
So I believe, and Mr. Gooding, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be inherent in that particular object item, where we have the $18,000 currently, that we would purchase those contracted services. So, but it can be further delineated by the board in the deeper document. So,
thank you, Ms. Hudson. Any other questions from board members? Thank you.
If I can.
Oh, Mr. Vice President.
And I thank all of our colleagues for their statements and points of view. I certainly agree with you in terms of definitely the strategic planning aspect of our work, that generative part of what we do as a board, that's helps us kind of plan our trestle board as we've done now for the next 5 years. I will say though that and maybe the word was misused, but I want to make sure the listening public doesn't misinterpret the word nefarious for our work. Our work is not despicable. Our work is not nefarious. Our work is actually something that's generative, that helps build us, our capacity as a board, and certainly our capacity as an organization. So I want to make sure that word was not misinterpreted as something clandestine or solicitous in nature, but something that's really about the building and growth of our board as an organization, and of course the district as a whole.
Mr. Vice President, I think you may have misheard. I don't recall hearing that word.
I didn't hear that word.
So, all right. So,
If I could clarify.
Yes,
maybe
ma'am.
In the, travel and registration expenses to, to not just attend conferences, but to represent the board at conferences and to report back, but then breaking out where we have funds for internal training, that is clarified. I mean, but I think in that representation, and then, how we, honestly, I think making time, maybe, in our agendas going forward, we make time for some committee reports, we make time for when folks go to those conferences, report back, so that we have an opportunity to talk about that as a board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benton. Oh, Mr. Brown.
Further, I just, it's a good time to say that I agree very much with Mary Jo's sentiment on those matters. Breaking that out, I think, will be helpful. Focusing much more on board in-service, here rather than travel, I think will be greatly to our benefit as board members.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Benton, Dr. Rausch, thank you very much. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. The last department is Superintendent CEO's Department Summary, found on page 18. And the superintendent's budget is comprised of legal services, media relations and communications, the state and federal programs and budget and financial management, as well as our student mentoring program. You will see on page 18 the key investments, and again reminding the board that key investments represent 60 to 65% of the overall request with each department. And so you see those items there: legal services, both the insurance or brokerage services as well as those services retained are about equal, around $1 million each. And media relations and communications, they have a number of items here under purchase services for the auto dialer, for the application, to engage our new American communities, video and print production, media engagement, so on, and as well as under purchase services where we can have informational campaigns through the purchase of radio, print, social, or digital communication. Also, when we do events such as enrollment or opening of school, the school choice fairs, Children's Day, Countdown to Kindergarten, the Family Academies, Columbus Proud, all of the advertisements related to those events are through this particular budget. You'll see an ESC comprehensive contract. We do receive $6.50 per pupil provided through the ESC, but of course we need to reflect that here so that we can expend against it. And then there are also consultation services down at the bottom, and these are services that may not be captured in other budgets. That, for example, if we wanted to move dollars from this line to another to support the winners of the Rube Goldberg contest, this would be a way that we could do that, because we wouldn't have anticipated that when we went through the initial budgeting proposal, and so we have a line here from which we can draw and transfer dollars. The major budget requests are outlined there under each of the key investment areas, with the outcomes being to, first of all, raise the levels of accountability of the district so that it continues to grow the community's confidence in Columbus City Schools and their Governance Board of Education, to ensure that we're being as efficient and effective as possible. I believe our end of the year review and update on the end of the year review, as well as the state of the district, highlighted that we've been successful in that regard, collectively successful, and to continue to be more proactive, not only collaborative, but taking a leadership role. The board has made clear that that's something they expect of the state's largest district, to not only in the state be setting that agenda, but also setting the agenda nationally where appropriate. And so we believe these are all outcomes of this tiny little budget in the big scheme of things. And that is the end of the departments.
Are there questions from board members? Ms. Hudson?
Thank you, President Baker. I would, just as, well, probably two things. One, a suggestion, and under you've got legal, so the first item of legal services, purchase services. I think, I understand, no need to call anybody, Larry up or anything. I just think we should be clear. My understanding is our purchase of insurance is done through legal, but this isn't an additional $1.1 million of legal fees and services. And I think maybe we put in there purchase of, or payment of property and casualty insurance premium and broker and retention of broker services, maybe a little parentheses, non-legal, something along those lines. Just so for the public reading this, they don't think that's an extra $1 million in legal fees. Nobody likes to pay lawyers.
I see that Mr. Gooding's already made notes of that change. Thank you. The same point. And then just to refresh, when you roll this up to the front matter of your document, page 5 shows where those requests lie in terms of objects. So whether it's a purchase, service, supplies and materials, equipment, or other. And page 11 shows how those expenditure requests fall out relative to the different departments of the district. So you do see that we continue to ask for the majority of the non-personnel budget to support academic services and accountability initiatives, business and operations, right on the tail end of that. And then that itty bitty teeny tiny slice of 1% is my budget. But that's page 11, as it should be. Welcome your questions.
Are there other questions from board members? All right, well, hearing none.
So I would like to say thank you particularly to the chair of the Finance Advisory Committee and to Vice President Cole for their guidance in helping to suggest a format that was comprehensible by a number of different audiences that certainly look at this through different filters. But mostly really to the people that are in the room that have spent, as you know, countless hours preparing budgets, tweaking those budgets repeatedly. This truly is an aspirational budget. It is what we believe would be required in order for the district to be the #1 district in the nation. And it's spread out over the next 5 years to be sensitive to our means. And we're very proud to present this, but continue to welcome your input and understand that it is a dynamic document.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Brown, have you a point to share?
This has been very, very helpful. I guess my question is, as we go forward, as I have additional questions, now that I have the document and can spend some time and simply defining terms or understanding, do you have a suggestion for the best way in which to do that? Some of these are likely to be folks on the administrative team, or I obviously can route everything through JC as in the past, but I didn't know if there might be a more efficient or a preferred way to.
Thank you, President Baker, to Board Member Brown. No, I believe funneling that through Mr. Benton is the proper way through board services. He can capture each board member's questions and then provide the responses to the full board. And we can certainly make those available that way. I think it'll be the most efficient method of doing that. If there are questions that are very granular in nature, very programmatically specific, JC will know who to contact, and it may require that sort of a dialogue. But I thank you for that, and do note that there is an extensive glossary on the back side of this document in our efforts to try to assist readers with understanding. That's page 7,000, I think. So yeah, it's understandable. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Ms. Hudson.
I just wanted to see if we could talk about next steps and to follow up with Board Member Brown, that the Finance Appropriations Committee will meet next Thursday, or this coming Thursday, pardon me, the 10th, that's right, sorry. We'll meet this Thursday here in this room at 3:30. So we will review this again, but it won't be, the review, I think we'll try to focus more on where expenses are categorized, how that analysis has been done from more of a finance perspective as opposed to the policy view. What that is intended to do then is to be ready to tee it up, to bump this up against then the upcoming forecast. So we'll have to, because then, then we have to, I think then it'll come back to board, what do we need to do in light of forecast and these budget recommendations? and what will that be? What will that look like? And so, what I would suggest, and I think we will bring some of that back to the board for additional discussion, and so the Finance Committee won't be responding to that, but I think we'll try to package this and the analysis into a couple categories, so that then that can come back to the board and say we've got a couple buckets of analysis and decisions that would need to be made before the district could move forward with this budget, either as proposed or in some form thereon, based on what the forecast is going to look like. As you know, that'll be finalized in May, but we're beginning that process as well. Does that sound acceptable?
Makes sense to me, colleagues.
I'm good.
Very good.
Okay, and again, anyone's welcome. I would just ask board members, if you come to the Finance Committee meeting Thursday, to, kind of keep questions, et cetera, in the spirit of those, more of the finance categorization and analysis. And if we have additional policy questions, let's figure out a time to debate and discuss that as a board.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Hudson. So, as the board and district march toward our new vision, which is we will create a world-class model of public education that prepares members of our communities to reach their full potential, this type of budget that you have presented in conjunction with all these staff who I know have really worked very hard to bring this to us, this is the sort of path that we're on to create the sort of district that we all want to create together. So I want to thank you. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you, every single staff member who's been involved in the process, other individuals who have participated as well. I know we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
And I didn't mean to close out you.
Mr. Peretti?
I apologize. I wanted to say thank you, and just reflecting on the process and how this has changed, looking at how it first started last year, and looking back to our original budget hearings that were similar to this, when we got into some of the programmatic policy sort of aspects, the flow, the tone, and the way that we've been really moving has been really impressive. Just seeing how this movie, today, it's an hour shorter than I expected, and then I think that's because of the staff preparing the information as we become more educated in the process. So it's been very, very helpful. I really, really appreciate everyone's really hard work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peretti. All right, now if there's nothing else for the good of the order, the chair will entertain a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
That motion carried.
You never called my name.
Oh, Mr. Peretti? I'm sorry.
We stand adjourned.
You have to stay.